The Atlanta child murders. That's what we cover here on this channel, the Atlanta Confidential Podcast. This case has captivated the entire globe. I heard someone in a meeting that we had a while ago say that they were in Japan and they heard someone talking about this back in the 80s, someone older. And because of this case, it's produced some projects along the way. We had the HBO project as a recent. Many years ago, we had the show on YouTube, Reclamation, and we had the TV show with Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, the movie back in 1985, I think.
Yeah, and so this case has captivated all of us, and while we may have some problems with this and that with different projects for whatever reason, one thing is solidly true is that these projects are helping keep the memories and lives and legacies of the deceased in the minds of the public. And to that, I could only give a huge applaud.
Absolutely.
So, Jarvis, out of these particular projects, which ones were your favorite?
Well, let me add on something what you just said also. Before I answer that question, I find it amazing even now of the pushback from people in the media, and city government of Atlanta, Georgia, and statewide government, even national government, how the pushback is to kind of squash this. I mean, they want to help. The city, reopened the cases. They were supposed to be doing a monument for, this after 40 years. They finally was going to do a monument for these victims, but it's almost like the city would rather this thing just die out and be done with. And I'm not saying everyone in the city, not everyone in the city government, but a lot of people would just rather this just die out and be done with. It happened. It was a tragedy. But let's move forward. And my whole thing has always been, and I'm not alone. I know you feel the same way, and there are others also that feel like you really can't move on unless everything has been told. And this had nothing to do with Wayne Williams. There was a lot that happened that has never been brought to the surface, and I just think that has to happen before the city can move on. People have died, parents have died, other people who have been, investigating and, who have written books and whatnot have died, because it's been 40 years ago, of course. But just nothing has been done to help the cause of finding the truth. And people say, well, we got the truth. I mean, Wayne Williams did it. This is what happened. He killed all of them. The ones he didn't kill, maybe the parents killed. It's always been these little
murmurings.
But there just never have been like and in fact, I remember listening to one of the detectives said that if Wayne Williams came out himself and said he did it, people will still be doubting it. And I almost like to talk to the families and the citizens of the city as though we're like so stupid that we would just accept anything. We are so wholeheartedly invested in Wayne Williams' innocence. I can tell you right now, Ben and I are not free Wayne Williams people. We think he's involved in something, in some of this, in some kind of way. We have never gotten to the bottom of what and to what level, but we do think he's involved. So to go back to your question about these projects that have been over the years, as far as my likes and dislikes, or how I rank them as far as, the best, or, better than other ones. I think for me, the best one was Reclamation. It was a documentary that was done by a gentleman named William Scarborough. William Scarborough was a South African. He's not attached to these cases as far as geographically. He's not from Atlanta. He's a white gentleman, so he's not he's a white guy. But I'm not sure what caused him to do his project. We're going to find out because we're going to eventually interview him. I've already talked to him once or twice, and he's agreed to talk to us. So we're going to ask him these questions. But he has done a great documentary on these cases. I think it's put out about 10 years ago. It's on YouTube. It's called Reclamation. It's a free documentary. I think it's a 5-part series. A lot of information he has been excellent. I mean, he's not one of those who believe that Wayne Williams didn't do anything. He just gives out the information and lets you kind of go with it from there. So I think for me, his was the best documentary thus far. Second to me would be the HBO documentary. I think they did an excellent job on researching. They had a big crew, of course, at money and fundings and backing. So they were able to do an excellent job. I think they covered. I think they covered more than any other documentary have covered so far, including Reclamation. They covered a lot of information in a 5-part series. It's still on HBO under their documentary series. I forget the name of it, but let's look under the Atlanta missing and murder cases, and you'll find it. I was actually interviewed for that documentary as well.
How did you become a part of that?
Well, they found me through. They were researching, getting documents, getting information from local authorities, Atlanta Police Department, GBI, which is Georgia Bureau of Investigation, FBI, of course, other agencies, Fulton County DA office, and other local municipalities, and they saw in the GBI's list of people that were looking for information my name. And from what I was told, they saw other names too, but those were attached to news agencies, documentary houses, and other podcasters, I guess. But my name wasn't attached to anything. It was just Jarvis Miller. And so they became inquisitive about, what was my aim. And when I told them, I wasn't doing a documentary, a podcast, or a book, anything. I was just, Jarvis Miller, Atlanta citizen who had two friends who were victims of these crimes, and I just want to know more about what happened and get some closure for myself. To me it was therapy. Getting these documents, reading them, finding out the truth, finding out what really happened. So I think they became intrigued by that story. So they assisted me in what I was doing, gave me information that I hadn't gotten yet, and I shared with them files that I had. So it was a win-win for both of us. And I even interviewed with them. I think in one of the episodes on the HBO documentary, I'm talking about my friend Louis Jeter and how my feelings were when he went missing and eventually found murdered. So that's how I became involved with them. They wanted me to do more with them. They wanted me to do more interviews. They wanted to come out to my house and look in my office and me going through my documents and talking to them about how I gathered this information. But I just did not want to do that. I felt like, to me, it felt like it's like I was bragging almost. That's how I felt. At the time, I felt like if people see me doing this, they're gonna say, Jarvis just bragging. Jarvis not sincere about his motives.
Yeah.
I felt that way initially. So after them asking me 4 or 5 times about coming out to my house and interviewing me, and me giving them excuses about why I didn't want to do it, they eventually stopped asking. They went on with the project, did the documentary. Excellent job, went good. But then I look back on it and I said, you know what? That would have been more beneficial for the cause, if I would have just showed them. Because what it shows, to be honest about it, it shows this guy who was friends of victims and how invested he is in trying to find answers for his friends who were killed. So I think if I would have allowed that to happen, it would have done more good to the cause than bad that I thought it would have done. which really what brings us here now, bring us here now.
And like honestly, although I have a film background, I'm not an actor or anything like that, and I wasn't in front of the camera a little bit, but I am an actor. I'll just say I am an actor, but I just don't. I haven't done it in quite some time, and getting back in front of the camera is it's more than a notion sometimes because it's a little unnerving, you know, when somebody puts the lights on in the camera and then you got to go. It's an awkward thing, and if you've never really been into that and only done it like once or twice or whatever, it's not like something that's like at first fun.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those of you who know me personally, you know, this is not me. I mean, I'm not that much of an outspoken type person. I'm more behind the scenes. I do my thing. I'm just not an open person. I'm more of an introverted person. So for me, this is new. I mean, but out of the anxiety of doing so, there is a certain amount of satisfaction in wanting to do a good job, and not even just for my sake, but for the cause. And people may say, "What cause are you talking about?" I mean, the cause of getting to the bottom of what really happened.
The truth.
The truth, yeah. And I think that's the thing that propels me further with this than anything else is looking for the satisfaction of finding the answers, not only for myself but for those who are still seeking. And I'm not looking for myself to find them. If someone else find the answers, I don't give a doggone. I just want the answers to be found, and I want those players who were involved negatively with these kids in their lives and their demise. I want them to be exposed still. I mean, and Wayne Williams, I keep going back to him because I don't think he's totally innocent. I don't think he's he tried to portray this as being, nothing. I didn't do anything. And some of that I take as being possibly true. I'm doubtful of him being the killer per se, but I still see him as being involved. And there are other people who are involved too. And I just think that all that needs to be told.
Yeah, he's rightfully in jail.
Yeah, I mean, and even that, I mean, even if he is guilty of killing the two that they convicted him of, Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne, even if he is convicted, truthfully convicted of those two, there are other people who have killed people who have gotten out in 40 years.
And less than 40 years, well, 5 years.
I'm going to give you an example. There was a case in Atlanta back in 1977, and I'm kind of going off subject here, but there was a guy who owned, I think they classified him as being like a gay club owner. So he owned these gay clubs, and another guy come in town to open up a gay club, and this guy wanted this other guy out the business. So he hired this guy who to burn the man club down. He tried to burn it down, it didn't work. So he said, "Well, you got to kill him." So he got this guy to go kidnap the other guy, and he kidnapped him and two of his friends, and they took him to some woods out in South Fulton County. Coincidentally, the same farm woods where Timothy Hill, Eddie Duncan, and Michael McIntosh were found. The same portion of South Fulton County, and he shot and killed these guys, execution style, in the back of the head. Killed them. He got found out. He got convicted of murder. He and the owner of the clubs, and they got convicted of these murders, gangland style murders. That was 1977. They got out of prison in 2013. And they killed 3 men execution style, and they admittedly said once they were caught, they admitted to doing so, but they got out of prison. I mean, so like you mentioned, there are people who have served 5-10 years on a murder case, and they've gotten out. So I do think he deserves a nod, a possibility of getting out, because if you only been convicted of the two of two of the crimes. Although they say that the other ones are attached to him, but he wasn't convicted of those cases. So as a result, I would think he deserves a chance to be freed again. But then the question remains: where this is where we're at. The other cases, and this is where the parents at, and the siblings and the loved ones of the other victims, they were never given their day in court. They were never provided justice in any kind of way. It was always said, well, he is possibly responsible for your loved one's death. But that's not justice, though. You can't sit here and say because someone is possibly the suspect in your loved one's death, we're going to be satisfied with that.
Yeah, because this is not spade. This is not two and a possible.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so
exactly.
This is something that you need to have some kind of definitive, some semblance of definition to it. Because,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, and even if they, and I'm gonna tell you what they said back then, and I need to look and make sure this is still applicable now as far as what they said. They were pretty much saying because of the cost it would have taken to convict him of all those cases, it would have been so astronomical that it would. But I'm like, but is that what their job is supposed to do? I mean, if the cost is an issue and you can't convict them of all 30 cases, then at least try to convict them of one of the children cases.
Well, this is where they threw me off, and I don't believe anything they're saying about that particular situation is because they actually allowed them to bring the 10 kids, the 10 children into the trial.
Right.
So you can forget me with that because you already introduced that information.
Right.
So you basically did try him with the 10 kids. They had to do the same amount of research and everything to produce it without actually charging him with the 10 murders, but producing the information to say this correlates with the death of the two older men, which
Start recording, and we're good to go then.
as I was saying, we had a little snafu in the studio. We had to deal with.
It's bound to happen.
It's bound to happen. So we're back. As I was saying, I want to reiterate is that they can miss me with the, not wanting to try to bring all the children because it'll be too expensive to put the children cases together because it's over 30 cases or whatever. You can miss me with that because they allowed them to bring in 10 of the children into the case without charging Wayne Williams with it. So here we are. You know what I mean? Here we are, and I don't think that was right to do. It's just in my opinion. I know it was illegal. They have the legal right to do that, but to now come back and try to say, in revisionist history, to say that you didn't have time. Just think about the defense.
Well, you mentioned about it being the legal right to do so. The Georgia Supreme Court justice that was this case went to the Supreme Court of Georgia for appeal. They wanted a new trial, and there are 7 justices who sit on the Georgia Supreme Court. Supreme Court. One of the justices, well, 2 of them initially
dissented.
Well, 2 of them agreed for a new trial. At the last minute, one of those 2 joined the other 5, who were against him having a retrial. And his reasoning was because 2 of us is not going to overturn it anyway. So why not just why not go along with the majority opinion? But this one justice, Justice Smith, he dissented on his reason. He wrote like a 40 or 50 or 60 page dissent on his reasonings behind why he thought that he deserved a new trial. And one of them was he didn't think it was legally fair for them to introduce the other 10 cases, 10 out of 30. And so they chose 10 that they thought that Wayne was more connected to. He didn't think that was fair because, the 2 that he was convicted of, Nathaniel Cater and Jermaine Payne, they were both found in the Chattahoochee River. They were both nude or partially nude. They were both adults. But the other 10 that they attached to Wayne during the trial. They were all teenagers. They were all found on dry land, with the exception of one, which was in Jojo Bell. So the MO didn't match the two that he was convicted of. So that was one of the reasons why this Georgia Supreme Court justice chose to dissent and agree that Wayne Williams should have a new trial. And there were others too. We can discuss those
Yeah,
later.
because it prejudiced the jury.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was a precedent that should not have been crossed because of the fact that if you convicted me of a crime, and this crime being the murder of two men, and then you're gonna bring in something totally almost it's the same type of crime, but it's almost a whole different crime. How is that fair? And I've always contended that I'd be satisfied if they gave him a fair trial and he was convicted based on all the evidence in totality. If they still found him guilty, I had no problem with it. But I don't think that he was the the case of him being guilty of, first of all, the two of the adult victims. And even with those two, I don't think it was fair how the trial went. That's always been my contention. I'm not, like I said again. I go back. I'm not a free Wayne Williams advocate.
It's just truth, though.
It's just truth. And then the irony of it is, and this goes to you, me, and everyone else. You all want a fair trial. If you're convicted of a crime, if you did it or did not do it, you still want a fair trial. If you're found guilty of something that you feel like you didn't do, but you still feel like you see the fair trial, then I'm like, okay, it is what it is. But in his case, it was, to me, it was like so jumbled up. Now there are those who were there in the trial. There were some journalists. One would be Dale Russell, who is a journalist here locally at one of the local news stations. Investigative reporter, yeah, for Fox 5. He did a recent documentary, I guess you can consider that, on the cases also on the conviction of Wayne Williams.
And he said it's going to be the be-all, end-all.
End all the be-all, yeah, which is, I heard the same thing with Payne Lindsey's podcast. But his contention is, he was there in the trial, and he was. I mean, he was a reporter. It was his first big major case in Atlanta when he became a reporter here. So he sat through all the trial. He said, I still got my notes of the trial, got my notes of what happened, what was said, evidence that was presented. I think that he received a fair trial. And so people like that, you just cannot sway one way or the other. But the question I've always wondered is, okay, what is it that they see that I'm not seeing? Because, I think people look at the way Wayne Williams acts and the way he acted then and now, and kind of weird and kind of suspicious in the way but these things does not make a person a killer.
No.
And even the evidence that they have on him. Okay, the fiber evidence. We can go into that on another series because it's very intense on these fiber evidence. But you take those out. They said, well, he said that he hates young black kids, and so that was his motive for doing it. And I'm like, that was and the person who said that was a guy named Bobby Tolan. He's a white gentleman that worked for an ambulance service that Wayne Williams worked with in a roundabout way. He somewhat befriended these guys, so he thought. This guy said that Wayne told him that if you kill one black kid, you can kind of eliminate the whole race of people. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. Now, he said this on stand, during the trial, and they took it as the truth. Now, this is what prosecution, this is one of their witnesses, but the guy named was Bobby Lee Tolan, but in actuality, his name was Bobby Lee Williams. So he testified under an assumed name, first of all, on an alias, and they didn't catch that. The prosecution didn't catch it. Neither did the defense. But then later on, a news agency asked the owner of the ambulance service about that statement, and the owner said, Wayne Williams didn't say that. He said Bobby Lee said that if you kill one young black person, N-word he used, you can get rid of the whole. He said Bobby Lee is the one that said that. But Bobby Lee said that Wayne Williams said that. I mean, something like that should not have been introduced in the court, even beyond what, because it's hearsay.
It's hearsay. Yeah,
You
it's
know,
hearsay.
I
Yeah.
mean, so
And no one
any,
knows how he really felt about. That would be a good question to ask him when we talk to him again. You know.
yeah.
You know.
I've never seen some of the things that were said in court. Uh, Another witness came forth. The lady's name, Miss Ruth Warren, and she said that um, Wayne said no. She said she saw Louis Jeter getting into the car with a man. And the man had a scar on it, like a lightning bolt scar on his face or whatever. The description she gave was not Wayne Williams, and but when she testified on the stand, she said that Wayne Williams was the person who she saw. But then when news reporters went to her house after the trials, she said that was her first time seeing Wayne Williams was that day in the court. Though, I mean, every person who testified against him, their testimony has been refuted several times. The guy who said that he saw Wayne Williams and Nathaniel Cater walking in the park holding hands, he later refuted what he said. The boy who said that Wayne Williams tried to, he got in the car with Wayne Williams, and Wayne Williams tried to molest him and tried to attack him. He was later proven to be a liar and lying about that. The only person that seemed to be credible in their testimony was Sharon Blakely, who, and it really wasn't what she said that was that credible, because what she said was hearsay also. She said she thought that Wayne Williams was, paranoid schizophrenic. She thought that, he could have been, he's a killer. But it was at the end. She was the last person that testified. And at the end of her testimony, Wayne Williams asked his defense attorney, which I think was Al Binder, he asked him to ask her, does she think that he's guilty? And the defense attorney didn't want to do it. He's like, I don't want to. And the judge said, if your client wants you to ask that question, you need to ask the question. So he asked Sharon Blakely, do you think that he's guilty of these killings? And it said the courtroom was whisper quiet for 30 seconds or whatever. And she looked at Wayne. She looked away. She looked away. And they said she was crying, and she shook her head and she said, I think he did it, and I think he needs some help. I mean, and that was the last person that.
And based off what?
Exactly. But her testimony was so emotional.
Yeah, it was so emotional and so emotionally charged.
And they looked at her as being a friend of his. So if she felt that way, you have to have some weight to it. They really wasn't that close in friendship, though. I mean, but the jury didn't see it that way, because the prosecution did an excellent job on painting a picture for these jury members to see a different side of what actually happened. And the other side of the coin, the defense did such a terrible job in painting their client. Another thing I heard that pretty much hung him when he got on the stand.
Should have never ever been on the stand.
It should never been on the stand.
Because the fact of the matter is, they had nothing.
Yeah.
If he would have been on the stand, he was like, "No, I'm not going on the stand." I mean, what would they have done? Now, I will say this. Sometimes I get my little bit of conspiracy thing. This is not fact. This is just Ben speaking, okay? I just think that they were going to make that happen either way.
Well, this is what I've read. I've read that the prosecution felt like they were losing the case. They felt like, we're losing this, because... I wondered that the Wayne's team felt like they were winning by that time, but the prosecution felt like they were losing this. So they went to the FBI profiler. He told them what to do. He said, you get Wayne on the stand, do this, this, and this. Keep asking him a question over and over again. You asked him a question about his name, Wayne Williams. Okay, you go on with 10 questions and come back to the same question again. He said, you will aggravate him enough where he's going to snap. This is what the FBI profiler told them. That's what they did. They would ask them, okay, did you kill Nathaniel Cater? He said, no. Okay, then they go to something else. They come back to that same question again, and they kept on doing it to the point where he snapped and outburst, and he said, "You want the real Wayne Williams?" He just acted, acting a fool, and that still did for him. Now, amazingly, some of the jurors said up until that point they were kind of 50-50 on guilty or not. But they said when they saw him act that way, they said, "I knew he had to be guilty because he just acted like a crazy man." I'm like,
why would anybody put Wayne Williams, somebody who likes the limelight. His personality was of such that he seeks out the light.
Right.
So it's like, why would you put somebody with that kind of mindset on the stand? They're gonna grandstand. They're gonna,
Terrible advice. I mean, it's often been said about quite a few who felt like Wayne Williams' attorney, which is Mary Welkins, was almost a plant. You know, she was
She did work for the.
the prosecution at one. Well, she worked for Fulton County at one time. She was she was city solicitor, so she knew the prosecution very well. She knew what's his name, Lewis Slayton, who was the DA, the assistant DA. She knew Gordon Miller and Mallard and what's the other guy named Drolet. I mean, she knew these guys. Even Wallace Speed was, they had a large prosecution team. I mean, they had five prosecutors, and she had herself, Mary Welcome, had Al Binder. I think it was three or four of them as well. But they had their team and they had the backing financially of Fulton County. How can you compete against that, though?
Can't.
Now, another thing I found out recently too was Wayne tried to qualify as an indigent defendant, which means that he would have been qualified for extra funding to help out his defense, and the judge denied it. I'm like, I mean, this guy's not working. I mean, he lives with his parents, but you can't. His parents not on trial. He is. So if he's not working. He has no assets. He's indigent. So you have to give him extra funding to help his defense. But I just think it was
Every way they could railroad it, they railroaded.
it was a railroad, and you have to ask yourself why. And I think people who are so, I keep going back to Del Russell because he's the most vocal and visual one who felt like everything went the way it's supposed to have went. You have to ask yourself why were they so at a rush to drown people with information that was not complete, even with the fiber information. And like I said, that'll be an episode by itself because the fiber information in this case was so.
Maybe this shall be our next episode.
It may have to be because that's been the dispute. Even people who are new to this, they say, well, but the fibers matched. So the fibers matched. Even if he didn't say, I think if you kill one black kid or one black N word, you can get rid of a whole nation, generation of them. Even if he didn't say that, the fibers match. So how can you get away from that? Or another argument that a lot of people like to give is, well, he was on the bridge that night. So, and they found Decatur's body in the next day or two. I mean, he would have had to throw him off the bridge. But this is one thing. I mentioned this to a friend of mine the other week, and we've been going back and forth on this. But okay, the bridge on James Jackson Parkway Bridge is about 30 feet above the river. If you throw a body off a bridge at that height, live or dead, a body hitting that water, you're gonna have some broken bones somewhere, or you're gonna have some bruising on the body, the portion that enters the water. And I looked at his Cater's medical examiner's report. Also, the Payne's. You see nothing at all about broken bones or bruising where the body entered the water, though. To me, that tells me that those body entered the water not from a bridge, but closer to the shore itself, though.
Yeah, because you say you heard a splash. That's all they heard. That's all they heard. You didn't hear. It just was a small splash. They said they heard it was like a small splash.
Yeah.
So somebody could have just, two people could have just swung him and right off the bank. But Payne Lindsey, they got that anatomical.
I remember that. Yeah.
Device that look the size and weight of a man, and they threw it off the bridge and everything. And they was like, that's one of the things that they said. One of the people in the last episode, one of the people said that that's what solidified it for them is like that they threw their body over and they heard the splash. And well, the splash didn't necessarily have to come from the bridge. You
Yeah.
could have, you should have took it down near the bank or somewhere above it, and took it and then threw it out and see what it splashed to. So you know what I'm saying. So it's like it's not science. That's not a scientific thing. Like, even they said that, but then
Yeah.
they took it as like they just show you how screwed up this whole thing is. It's like
Well, it took it as though it was definite. I mean, even in their experiment of throwing the anatomically correct body into the water, they took it as okay. This could have happened because of the fact that we did our test and this is our results, and we heard a splash, and this is But like I said, and someone who was in forensic science, please, explain to me. But I would just think, even if I dive off a bridge into water and my feet hit the water first, even if I don't get any broken bones, there's gonna be some bruising on the bottom of my feet, and,
yeah,
especially if I'm dead.
yeah.
Because usually as you swim, okay,
And also, I never looked at what was in his lungs. I never looked and saw if it was water in his lungs.
and I'm gonna look at the ME report and look again because yeah, that would make a good point. That's why they
Because if he
said.
was dead, he wouldn't have any water in his lungs.
Well, it's funny because Eddie Duncan, who was found in the river, he was down in South Fulton County. He was found. They found water in his lungs. Now, strangely enough, he floated to the Douglas County side of the river. So Douglas County took authority over the body because it was in their jurisdiction. And in their ME report, they initially said accidental drowning because there was water in his lungs. And
Yeah,
and-
exactly.
but then they look back, they look at the body size, the body makeup, and they said, you know what, this guy has to be attached. And they realized, okay, he knew some of the victims, and they had just found Timothy Hill the day before that, in the same location where they found Duncan. So they deduced that he had to be part of these killings. So as a result, I don't know, they changed their findings, but they turned it over to Fulton County or the task force, and task force said, okay, he's one of the victims. This is what I read it in Timothy Hill's case. He was found in the river in South Fulton County. A guy, there's a street called Cochran Road. It parallels the river off of Fourth Industrial Boulevard. It parallels the river. And this guy said he was on his way home one night. He said he take that route some nights, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. He said he was on his way home about 5:30 or 6 in the evening. Cochran Road is a small road, and portions of it is dirt. He said he came to this bridge. There are creeks that runs perpendicular to Cochran Road. He said he saw a white guy in a green Nova who was parked on right the bridge, and he was underneath the bridge doing something. He said he comes up on the car. The guy realized the car, so he comes. The guy gets in his car, moves the car. The guy never makes contact with him facially. He never got the chance to see the guy straight on. But he said the guy moved his car. He goes around the guy and continues on to his home. He found out a week later that they found Timothy Hill's body, and he realized, "Nah, I saw this guy on this bridge that parallels and the creek that runs to the Chattahoochee River." And some of the investigators in Timothy Hill's case believe that's where he entered the water at. It wasn't in the river. It was in the stream that runs to the river. And if you look at even where Cater's body was found, there were small tributaries also that run off from the main river to the river itself. How do we know that Cater didn't enter the river the same way Timothy Hill entered the river? How do we know any of them did? Because none of them have shown any signs physically of any bruising being thrown off a bridge or anything at a high level. And so that's always been my question. That's why I hope someone who is in forensic science can at least answer that question for me, because and these are questions that I have not found the answer to. As much research that you and I have done, these are questions that I've never found the answer to. And I would have thought those would have been asked in the court. You would have thought that Mary Welcomes or someone on Wayne Williams' defense team would have questioned. They were more concerned with the fact that he didn't throw the body out the water. They should have been pushing more like, if he did that, wouldn't this would have happened to the body? Wouldn't you ever seen evidence that the body had come from 30 feet above them.
So I think there's two things there. When I go back and forth on what to say about Wayne Williams' defense team or whatever, because they were overwhelmed with the amount of things they had to defend.
Yeah,
they had these two deaths, which I don't know if anybody ever been around any actual legal, not TV stuff, but the actual legals. Like somebody died, one person gets killed, it produces so much paperwork.
It does. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
especially if the homicide.
Yeah, homicide.
They said kill, so that means
yeah. They produce so much paper or so much data, and because of that, like you just think about it, they got to take all this and disseminate this information to break it down, and then be able to convey it in a way that helps their client or whatever side you're on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of information, and you talking about you take these two then people who got like these are boxes of information, and then they come along and say, okay, they can decide, they can choose, pick and choose out of who they want to decide who they want to introduced as evidence.
Right.
Which child they can just like they playing dominoes or something,
mm-hmm.
and then they choose them, and then now you still have to defend that.
Right.
So that's a technique that actually worked. They overwhelmed the defense. I don't know even if I don't know what you could have. I mean, like you would need another team like O.J. Simpson had, and he didn't have that kind of money. Like,
well, this is the caveat too of the other 10 that they introduced. They didn't find out about which 10 they were going to introduce until like a few weeks prior to the actual trial, beginning of the trial. Now, Wayne Williams' defense team knew that they were going to introduce 10. I'm not sure they knew the number, but they knew they were going to introduce more than just the two that he was being convicted of. But they didn't know until prior to. I'm not sure the time frame. I think it was 2 weeks or 2 weeks before the trial began is when they found out. Okay, not only are we going to we're convicting on these 2 adult cases, we're going to introduce these other 10. They didn't know until 2 weeks before the trial that those were the 10. So now you got to go back and look through all the information on those particular 10 and find out what's in these 10 that we can break down to say that he couldn't have done it. But in the same token, I think the prosecution took those 10 and broke them down and said, okay, we can use this, this, and this. So they already knew what they could use. Yep. That's why they chose those 10 because the other. It was 30 total, and so it's 12 that he's been convicted of. So that's 18 other ones that they didn't even throw into the batch because they knew there wasn't enough evidence to try him on.
I don't even think they even at some point cared. They just wanted to choose the ones that was going to have as much
impact,
Yes, as possible, and that's exactly what they did. Is like.
Well, they admitted that. They actually said that's why we chose these 10 because these 10 are the one that we have the most evidence on that is connected to him. Not so much only fiber, but also of people saying they saw him with this person and whatnot.
Yeah, it's and you think you go. It's like you're going in a wrestling match to fight Rocky Johnson. And then you get there and it's Andre the Giant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so now what it's a different kind of thing you have to deal with. You gotta try to set for it. And they did an excellent the prosecution did their job.
They did their job. And see really what happens, even using your analogy, what happens then is that you're no longer in fight mode. You're in survival mode, So you're not trying to just win the fight. You're trying not to get killed, and you're always backpedaling to defend yourself. And that's what happened in this case. And again, like I said initially, if it was a fair trial, if I think that if everything was done based on what you think what you would want done to you if you were on trial, I wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't be doing what I would still be inquisitive about what happened to my friends, but I wouldn't be pushing as hard as I am about this because I felt okay. You know what? Although I still doubt the possibility that he was killed, all of them, but I think that the unfairness of the trial is what made this thing so murky and messy. And here we are, 40-something years later. I mean, and you still have this great divide within the city of people who feel like he's guilty and you need to move on and forget about it. They got their man. And you got people who feel like he didn't do it. And you got people in the middle who feel like, okay, he's involved in some kind of way, but if he's guilty, is guilty of something else involved in what led up to these killings. And so I'm kind of on that fence where I think he's involved not so much in the killing, but in what led up to the killing. Because we're going to get into what all was happening back then. And some of you already know this, but a lot of people don't know what all was going on in the city of Atlanta back then.
Yeah, definitely.
Among youth. I think this being a good introduction into what we're here for, what our aims are, what we want to talk about, what this podcast is going to be about. But I guarantee you, we're going to bring more than just our opinions and what we feel like should be brought out. I mean, we're going to actually give you, post actual excerpts from case files and let you read for yourself other suspects, other possibilities, other just everything that we've come across and we've gleaned in all this research. I'm talking about what 10 and 15, 20,000 pages total.
Yeah.
Of information.
At least.
Yeah,
yes.
and still even now getting information in. I mean, because we don't even have all of it yet. I mean, there's still some information that we haven't gotten that we're still waiting on. And I'm not even going to get into the series of women that were killed also that parallel these killings that the city just kind of squashed. And I mean, it's just so much.
And I think that's one of the things that to me is a tragedy is that in order to suit your political devices, you allow people to die and no one to pay for it. Because it was going to mess with your political life, and I just think that's crazy.
Well, you look at how the city propelled itself afterwards. We become the Mecca, Black Mecca of the South, but the Mecca in general of the South. The largest international airport in the world. We had the Olympics here. We got all these great corporations moved to Atlanta, and I wonder would that have happened if they had not squashed this thing the way they did, because I really think that had a lot to do with them finding someone to pin this on. And people say, well, this has been an argument. People will always say, well, he would have had to have done it because, for one, when they arrested him, the killing stopped. Two, they wouldn't have just convicted him knowing that a real killer was still out there. I mean, but if you don't know about what we've seen and we've read, the killing stopped, but you look at the last 6 victims, those weren't like the same killings of the children. Mm-hmm. Those were like, they were hushing up people. I honestly think Cater, Payne, McIntosh, Duncan, I think those were killed to shut them up though, and even they throw one in there also, like John Porter. He was the oldest. He was like 28 years old. No connection at all to any of these victims. None whatsoever. The only thing I think they found is a fiber on him that matched Wayne Williams, but they even have him among the 30. It's just just crazy, really, the way this thing has panned out over the years, though.
Yeah, and I think as we say, it's just we can't get it all in this episode, but we're gonna definitely continue this. It's been great talking to you guys as usual. And I appreciate you guys for following us and taking your time out to listen to some of the things we have to say. See you next week.
See you next week.